There are places drifting through the void where time itself seems afraid to move. Vast carcasses of forgotten wars, fused together from dead voidships, xenos wreckage, and cathedral-sized hulls that should never have touched. Space hulks. The Imperium teaches that they are hazards, navigational threats to be destroyed or avoided. But that is only the surface truth. The deeper truth is far worse. Because space hulks are not merely abandoned, they are occupied. Not always by things that can be named, not always by enemies that want to be seen. Entire boarding teams enter them armed with faith, promethium, and prayer, and never return. No distress calls, no final vox-screams, just silence, as if the hulk itself swallowed the memory of their existence. Somewhere in those drifting labyrinths, something waits patiently, learning the shape of human fear, and space hulks continue to arrive from the warp carrying horrors older than Imperial history, and more patient than death. If you find value in these forbidden histories of the Imperium, if you want to understand not just how humanity fights, but what it chooses to walk into, then consider supporting the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. These stories persist only as long as someone is willing to listen. The order to board a space hulk is never shouted. It arrives quietly, wrapped in ritual language and clipped confirmations, as if lowering the volume might make the reality less lethal. A data slate changes hands. A destination code is spoken once, never repeated. The word Hulk is used without embellishment because no embellishment improves the odds. Everyone present understands what it means. This is not a rescue. It is not even a mission in the heroic sense. It is an insertion into something that has already survived worse than them. Inside the assault craft, the air is dense with recycled breath and machine oil. Armor seals hiss as they lock, one by one, each sound marking the narrowing of options. Weapon checks are performed with exaggerated care, fingers lingering on familiar grips as if touch alone might anchor the mind. Promethium tanks are weighed by feel rather than measure. Magazines are seated and reseated, not because they are loose, but because ritual creates the illusion of control. No one speaks unless required. Voices carry too easily in confined spaces, and no one wants to hear doubt echoed back at them. The craft shudders as it closes distance. Through the viewport, the space hulk emerges from the void like a continent-sized scar. There is no single shape to it. Hull plates from a dozen eras overlap and fuse at impossible angles. Cathedral spires punch through xenos alloys. Imperial Aquilae, scarred and half-melted, are embedded sideways in foreign metal. Nothing about it suggests abandonment. It looks assembled rather than wrecked, as if the void itself had pressed fragments together with deliberate pressure. Auspex readings refuse to settle. Mass fluctuates. Internal voids appear and vanish between scans. Gravity wells overlap in ways that make no architectural sense. The tech priest assigned to the mission mutters binharic prayers under their breath, not for accuracy, but for forgiveness. The machine spirits are confused, and confusion in ancient systems is never benign. Docking clamps bite into the hulk's surface with a sound like breaking bone. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the craft lurches as local gravity asserts itself unevenly, pulling at armor and stomach alike. Someone swallows hard. Someone else tightens their grip on a bolter until their knuckles ache inside the gauntlet. The boarding ramp does not lower immediately. There is a pause while seals are tested, pressure equalized, and contamination protocols run. The silence stretches, heavy and expectant, as if the hulk is listening. When the ramp finally lowers, it opens onto darkness layered with dust. Lumen beams cut through drifting particles that sparkle briefly, then vanish. The air smells wrong. Old, but not stale. Like metal that has been warm for too long. The first step onto the hulk's deck is always the hardest, because it is the moment when imagination gives way to sensation. The deck plating is uneven beneath armored boots, subtly sloped in ways that pull balance off-center. Every step forward feels like stepping deeper into someone else's memory. The formation holds tight. Spacing is measured precisely, because separation here is not inconvenience. It is death delayed. Vox grills murmur confirmation codes, each voice sounding slightly distorted as if filtered through layers of interference. The sound does not echo properly. It is swallowed, absorbed by the corridors ahead. Lumen strips flicker weakly along walls that were never meant to meet, their edges fused and scarred by heat that no longer registers on thermal scans. Almost immediately, the hulk begins to assert itself. a corridor that appeared straight on auspex curves subtly in real space, forcing the team to adjust formation. A bulkhead marked on the map simply does not exist, replaced by a welded mass of unknown alloy veined with something organic. The tech priest pauses, mechadendrites twitching as they attempt communion. There is no response. Or worse, there is one, and it is not intelligible. The first sound comes without warning. Not a roar or a weapon discharge, but a low vibration felt through boots and bones alike. It travels along the deck plating, a slow pulse that feels almost like a heartbeat. The team freezes instinctively, weapons tracking the darkness. Auspex returns nothing. The vibration fades, leaving behind a sensation of pressure behind the eyes that lingers longer than it should. This is the moment veterans recognize. The moment when the Hulk stops being an object and becomes a presence. It does not rush. It does not announce itself. It simply acknowledges intrusion. Somewhere deep within its fused labyrinths, systems that were never designed to coexist grind against one another, and something adapts. The order to advance comes anyway. Orders always do. The Imperium does not pause because fear has found a reason. Boots move forward. Lumen beams sweep across doors sealed from the inside centuries ago. A faded warning sigil passes under a gloved hand, its meaning lost to time, but its intent unmistakable. Do not enter. Do not wake what is sleeping. As the team pushes deeper, the last clear line back to the assault craft bends out of sight. The air grows colder, then warmer, then cold again, cycling without pattern. Condensation forms briefly on armor plates, then evaporates. The Hulk is no longer just around them. It is interacting, testing responses, learning how they move and breathe. None of this is recorded in official after-action reports. If reports exist at all, they will speak of initial contact proceeding as expected, of no immediate hostile presence detected. What they cannot capture is the weight settling into the chest, the certainty forming quietly and unanimously among those inside. Something in this place has been waiting a very long time. The deeper they move, the less the Hulk resembles a wreck, and the more it feels like a deliberate construction whose logic has been lost to time. Corridors narrow without warning, forcing armored shoulders to scrape against fused plating that hums faintly at the point of contact. The vibration is not constant, it responds. When the team halts, it fades. When they advance, it returns, subtle enough to doubt, persistent enough to feel intentional. The lumen beams begin to reveal details that auspex failed to predict. Layer upon layer of overlapping decks, each from a different origin, pressed together until their boundaries dissolve. Imperial deck markings intersect with alien geometries that refuse familiar angles. Warning sigils are half consumed by corrosion or overgrown with calcified residue that looks disturbingly organic under magnification. The tech priest logs it automatically, but the data stream stutters, fragments dropping out as if the Hulk itself is censoring the record. Vox traffic degrades in stages rather than all at once. At first, it is a faint delay, responses arriving a half-second late. Then certain consonants drop out, turning words into approximations. Names become difficult to distinguish. Orders must be repeated twice, then 3 times, to ensure they are understood. The effect is insidious. No one panics, but everyone speaks louder, more sharply, as if volume can compensate for the sense that something is stealing meaning from their voices. The first sign of prior occupants appears where the corridor widens into what was once a junction. A voidsuit helmet lies crushed beneath fused plating, its visor spiderwebbed from an impact that never breached it. Inside, there is nothing but dust and fragments of bone reduced almost to powder. No scorch marks, no penetration, just absence. The implication settles heavily. Whoever died here did not explode, did not burn. They were simply consumed by time accelerated beyond comprehension. Further on, they find weapons embedded in walls at odd angles, as if dropped mid-fight, and then slowly absorbed as the Hulk shifted. A bolter fused into alien alloy, its magazine empty, its firing mechanism locked in place by corrosion that should have taken millennia to form. The Aquilae on its casing is still visible, though distorted, stretched as if the metal itself tried to escape the symbol. Someone mutters a brief prayer without realizing they've spoken. Gravity changes abruptly at the threshold of the next compartment. What should be down becomes sideways, pulling the team into a careful reorientation that breaks formation just enough to feel dangerous. Boots magnetize to the deck with a sharp clack. A loose shell casing skitters away, not falling, but drifting slowly toward a bulkhead that pulls it in with quiet inevitability. No one comments on how wrong it feels. Commenting would make it real. Then the auspex registers movement. Not close, not fast. Just a slow shift of mass deeper within the structure. Too large to be debris. Too coordinated to be random collapse. The reading flickers, disappears, then reappears slightly closer. Weapons are raised. Targeting optics sweep the darkness, painting shapes that refuse to resolve. The Hulk remains silent, as if amused by the sudden tension. A door ahead stands half open, its edges warped and blackened. Beyond it lies a chamber that once served as a chapel. The iconography is unmistakably Imperial, though heavily damaged. Benches are bolted to the deck, some torn free and embedded in the far wall. Candles long burned down to stubs are fused to the floor, their wax hardened into unnatural ridges. At the altar, something kneels. At first glance, it looks like a statue. Armor plates layered over a humanoid form, helm bowed, hands clasped in what might have been prayer. Then, a lumen beam catches the surface of the armor, and the illusion breaks. The plates are not intact. They have grown together with the surrounding structure, veins of foreign material threading through ceramite and bone alike. The figure is not kneeling. It is anchored. A faint sound escapes the vox grill before it can be suppressed. Not a word, just breath, sharp and involuntary. The figure does not react. Auspex shows no life signs, no heat differential. And yet, the sense of presence intensifies, pressing against the skull like a held breath. The tech priest approaches cautiously, mechadendrites extending to sample the interface between flesh, armor, and wall. The instant contact is made. Every lumen strip in the chamber flares simultaneously, flooding the space with harsh white light. Vox channels erupt in static. The vibration returns, stronger now, thrumming through the deck with unmistakable rhythm. The figure's helm twitches. Not a full movement, just enough to be seen, just enough to erase doubt. The Hulk has not been empty. It has been patient. Somewhere far behind them, unseen and unrecorded, a section of corridor they passed through earlier seals, shut with a sound like a closing throat. The last clean path back bends and twists out of alignment, no longer matching any map or memory. The boarding order did not send them into a dead place. It sent them into something that remembers. After the first contact, the Hulk changes its behavior. Not abruptly, not with violence, but with the slow confidence of something that has confirmed its suspicions. The corridors ahead no longer follow the logic of damaged construction. They feel arranged. Turns appear where there were none before. Shallow curves bending sightlines just enough to deny certainty. Auspex maps lag behind reality, redrawing themselves a fraction too late to be trusted. The team advances anyway, because stopping inside a space hulk is never neutral. Stillness invites attention. The temperature drops without warning. Breath fogs inside helmets, then clears again seconds later as warmth returns. The cycle repeats irregularly, long enough to numb fingers, short enough to prevent full acclimation. Armor servos compensate, but the body feels the strain. Muscles tighten. Movements grow slightly less precise. No one comments on it. Commenting would be admission, and admission weakens cohesion. They pass through a section where gravity fractures entirely. Up becomes optional. Deck plates float at odd angles, tethered by cables and fragments of hull that creak under stress. The team moves slowly, maglocks clicking on and off, each step measured. In the silence between movements, something drifts past just beyond the edge of the lumen beams. Not fast enough to be missed, not slow enough to be dismissed as debris. It slides away when the light catches it, disappearing into overlapping shadows. Vox contact between point and rear elements degrades further. Words smear together. Command phrases arrive distorted, stripped of urgency. When confirmation is requested, the reply comes back altered. Familiar voices rendered wrong by interference that does not show on diagnostic readouts. The tech priest attempts recalibration. The machine spirits respond with partial compliance, as if distracted. The Hulk does not block communication outright. It interferes just enough to make misunderstanding inevitable. The first loss is quiet. A pressure door seals behind the rear guard without warning, its locking mechanisms engaging with a finality that defies override. Warning runes flash, then stabilize into steady amber. Emergency release protocols return null responses. The squad halts, formation fracturing as they turn back, weapons raised, shouting orders that tangle in vox static. Through the viewport, the rear guard is visible. Two armored figures standing in a narrow section of corridor now isolated from the rest. They gesture urgently, weapons tracking something out of sight. The bulkhead between them shudders once. Then the lumen strip on the far side goes dark. Auspex shows movement where the rear guard stands, but the returns are wrong, elongated, distorted, bleeding into the surrounding structure. Vox contact collapses into a wash of static, punctuated by breathing that grows faster, then abruptly stops. No shots are fired. No screams carry through the hull. The silence afterward feels deliberate, as if the Hulk is waiting to see how the remaining team will respond. Doctrine demands immediate breach attempts. The team complies, because doctrine is the only thing that still exists. Cutting tools bite into the bulkhead, throwing sparks that drift lazily in the altered gravity. The metal resists more than it should, layers beneath the surface shifting and hardening as if reacting to the intrusion. Progress is slow. Every second stretches. When the breach is finally forced, the compartment beyond is empty. No bodies, no blood, no damage consistent with combat. The deck plating where the rear guard stood is seamless, unmarked, as though no one had ever occupied that space. The viewport that once offered a clear line of sight now looks out onto a different corridor entirely, its architecture subtly misaligned from memory. It is not a trick of perspective. The space itself has been rearranged. The loss registers fully then, a cold weight settling into the chest. Not grief. There is no time for that. But the understanding that the Hulk does not kill in ways that leave evidence. It removes. It edits. The team adjusts formation, tightening spacing until armor plates nearly touch. This feels safer. It is not. As they push on, signs of previous boardings accumulate. Scratched tally marks on bulkheads, some old, some recent. Spent shell casings fused into the deck at odd angles, as if gravity changed mid-fall. A discarded purity seal floats gently in a dead air pocket, its parchment brittle, its script faded to illegibility. These are not warnings left intentionally. They are remnants that escaped whatever process consumed their owners. The Hulk narrows again, forcing single-file movement. Lumen beams struggle to penetrate the gloom ahead, swallowed by layers of shadow that do not behave naturally. Sound dampens further. Footfalls lose their echo entirely, absorbed into the structure. Even breathing seems muted. The hiss of rebreathers reduced to something distant and unreal. Somewhere ahead, something moves again. This time it is closer. Not rushing, not hiding. Simply repositioning, as if the Hulk is shifting its internal contents to optimize the encounter. Auspex flickers, then goes blank for half a second longer than before. When it returns, the readings show the team's own heat signatures duplicated briefly, then merging with the background noise. The labyrinth is no longer just consuming space, it is consuming them. After the first disappearance, the Hulk stops pretending to be random. Its geometry tightens, corridors folding inward like clenched fingers, compressing movement and choice, until the team's progress feels less like advance and more like being guided. The lumen beams illuminate less with every step, not because their power fades, but because the shadows deepen, growing thicker at the edges, swallowing detail. What remains visible is precise and deliberate, as if the Hulk wants certain things to be seen and nothing else. Fatigue sets in quickly, accelerated by the constant micro-adjustments required to navigate shifting gravity and uneven surfaces. Armor servos whine softly, compensating for angles that change mid-stride. The sound becomes a liability, echoing faintly ahead, returning distorted, as though reflected through multiple corridors that do not appear on any map. Each echo arrives a fraction too late, turning the simple act of walking into an exercise in restraint. No one wants to be the one whose movement draws attention. Another junction opens into a vast internal cavity, a space so large the lumen beams cannot find its boundaries. Suspended platforms drift slowly through the void, tethered by cables and fragments of hull that stretch and retract like tendons. Some platforms bear the remnants of old engagements, scorch marks, shattered barricades. the twisted remains of defensive emplacements constructed in desperation and never dismantled. The site confirms what doctrine already suggests. Others have tried to hold this place. None succeeded. As the team crosses the first platform, the Hulk reacts. A tremor ripples through the structure, subtle but unmistakable, followed by a sound that vibrates through the chest rather than the ears. It is not mechanical failure, it is alignment. The cables shift, drawing the platform closer to the far side at a speed just slow enough to remain navigable. The Hulk is facilitating movement, not obstructing it, and that realization unsettles more than open hostility ever could. Midway across, Vox contact spikes with interference. Voices overlap, fragments of orders bleeding into one another until meaning blurs. Then a new sound intrudes, a Vox signal that does not belong to any channel in use. It carries the cadence of human speech, distorted but unmistakable, repeating a sequence of words that no one can fully make out. The tone is not aggressive. It is familiar, almost conversational, as if continuing a discussion interrupted long ago. The platform jolts. One of the team stumbles, maglocks disengaging for a heartbeat too long. They catch themselves on a cable slick with condensation, armor scraping against something that feels warmer than metal. The lumen beam swings down, revealing the surface beneath the platform. Layered plating fused with bone fragments and fabric remnants pressed flat by centuries of pressure. A gloved hand pulls free, leaving behind a smear that looks too much like dried blood to be coincidence. On the far side, the exit corridor contracts as they approach, its width narrowing perceptibly. The team accelerates instinctively, the unspoken fear of being cut off again overriding caution. They make it through just as the platform shudders violently, cables snapping back into the darkness. The void where it hung moments before is empty, as if it never existed. Auspex confirms it. The path behind them is gone. Breathing grows louder inside helmets despite conscious efforts to control it. Condensation beads along visor edges. The air carries a new scent now, faint but pervasive. Ozone mixed with something organic, something old. The Hulk is no longer content to disorient. It is closing distance, testing responses, cataloging reactions with methodical patience. They encounter a chamber filled with bodies. Not piled, not scattered, but arranged. Figures in various states of decay stand or kneel where they fell. Armor fused to walls or floors, weapons still clutched in skeletal hands. Some bear imperial markings from regiments that vanished centuries ago. Others wear equipment designs that do not appear in any current archive. All are fixed in place, held by the same invasive growth that claimed the kneeling figure earlier. Their Vox units crackle faintly, cycling through fragments of recorded sound. Half-finished orders, prayers cut short, screams reduced to static. The team does not linger. Looking too closely feels dangerous, as if recognition itself might invite assimilation. As they withdraw, one of the figure's heads turns slightly, the motion slow and deliberate. No weapons fire follows. There is no pursuit. The gesture feels less like threat and more like acknowledgement. By the time they leave the chamber, the sense of being hunted has inverted. The Hulk no longer feels like a predator chasing prey. It feels like a collector, guiding intruders through curated horrors, selecting what to reveal and what to conceal. Escape begins to feel theoretical, a concept that exists in doctrine but not in the reality unfolding around them. A final auspex ping breaks the oppressive quiet. A signal ahead, Imperial in origin, broadcasting a distress code so old its encryption has been deprecated for centuries. The coordinates suggest a command nexus or a bridge section, something that might still offer control, or at least answers. The team exchanges glances, silent agreement passing between them. Answers are dangerous, but ignorance is worse. They turn toward the signal, boots moving in unison, unaware that behind them, the corridor they just traversed has already begun to seal, its walls flowing together with slow, organic certainty. The labyrinth has decided where they are going next. The distress signal leads them into a region of the Hulk that feels older than the rest, not by years or centuries, but by intention. The air grows thick and dry, carrying the scent of ancient incense burned down to ash long ago. Every step forward stirs fine dust that floats lazily before settling again, as if even gravity is tired here. The walls bear the marks of imperial architecture in purer form, arched supports, devotional engravings, fragments of high Gothic script half erased by corrosion, and something that looks uncomfortably like growth. This section was once a command space. That much is clear. What remains of a bridge or strategium lies ahead, its shape distorted by collision and fusion with alien hull sections, but its purpose still legible in the arrangement of shattered consoles and viewing ports that now look out onto nothing but darkness, layered over darkness. The distress signal originates here, pulsing weakly from a vox array embedded in the wall at an angle that should not function. It transmits automatically, endlessly, its power source unknown. As they advance, the lumen beams catch movement, not ahead, but within the walls themselves. Shapes shift beneath layers of fused plating, outlines pressing briefly against the surface before dissolving back into the structure. The effect is subtle enough to doubt, but repeated often enough to become impossible to ignore. These are not creatures stalking them through corridors. They are part of the Hulk, integrated so completely that separating entity from environment feels meaningless. The first voice comes without warning, bleeding through the vox grills with sudden clarity. It speaks a name, not a designation or call sign, but a personal name, spoken with familiarity. The sound hits harder than any weapon discharge. For a heartbeat, training falters as memory intrudes. Faces, places, fragments of lives that should not exist here. The voice does not repeat itself. It does not elaborate. It has achieved its purpose and falls silent. They find the source of the signal near the center of the chamber. A Vox officer's station fused into the deck, its chair occupied by what remains of the operator. The body is desiccated, armor plates split and warped, ribcage visible through gaps where metal and bone have merged with the console itself. The Voxcaster continues to broadcast, cycling through distress codes that date back to a crusade long erased from most archives. The officer's helm is intact, visor opaque with grime. Against better judgment, one of the team reaches out and wipes the visor clean. The face beneath is preserved far better than it should be. Skin drawn tight, eyes sunken but intact, lips parted as if mid-sentence. The expression is not one of terror. It is concentration, duty frozen into flesh. For a moment, the corpse's eyes flicker, reflecting lumen light that should not register. A breath escapes the Vox grill, faint, mechanical, unmistakably present. The corpse speaks. Not loudly, not clearly, just enough to form words shaped by static and age. It issues an order to hold position, referencing threats that no longer exist and coordinates that no longer align with reality. The voice is wrong, layered with harmonic distortion that suggests multiple sources speaking through a single mouth. The order repeats once, then stops. The Voxcaster falls silent, finally dead. No one fires. No one moves. This is the moment when doctrine fails completely. There are no approved responses for an Imperial officer who is both dead and still obeying orders. The Aquilae etched into the armor's chestplate glints faintly, warped but recognizable. Whatever animates this remnant is not an obvious xenos organism, not a demonic manifestation in the way catechisms describe. It is something else, something born of abandonment, prolonged exposure, and the Hulk's slow, consuming patience. They back away carefully, weapons trained on the body even as reason insists it is no longer a threat. The chamber seems to watch them, the walls pressing in subtly, consoles shifting imperceptibly as if adjusting to their withdrawal. The sense of being observed intensifies, not hostile, but curious. Further into the strategium, they find more. Figures slumped at stations, half embedded in machinery, their augmetics fused into control surfaces. Some are tech priests, their robes calcified into the deck, mechadendrites petrified mid-motion. Others wear uniforms that predate current Imperial standards, insignia belonging to regiments officially listed as lost to the warp. All are integrated into the Hulk's systems, their bodies serving as conduits long after life should have ended. Occasionally, a console flickers to life as they pass, responding not to their presence, but to something deeper within the structure. Data scrolls flash unreadable glyphs. Warning runes ignite and fade. It feels less like stumbling upon a graveyard and more like entering a dormant organ that has begun to wake. The realization settles slowly and terribly. These are not survivors. They are not even victims in the usual sense. They are components. The Hulk does not merely kill boarding teams. It keeps them, repurposes them, integrates their last moments of duty into its own internal logic. Orders never fully expire here. They linger, echoing through systems that have no reason to forget. As they turn to leave the strategium, the distress signal activates again, not from the voxcaster they silenced, but from deeper within the hulk. The same code, the same cadence, a lure, refined through repetition and success. Whatever waits ahead has learned something important. Imperial duty does not end with death. They follow the renewed signal because the alternative is wandering blind, and blindness inside a space hulk is a slow form of surrender. The corridor beyond the strategium is narrower, lined with overlapping ribs of hull plating that curve inward like the inside of a throat. The air grows warmer with every step, carrying the scent of heated metal and old cloth. Somewhere ahead, a faint clicking repeats at irregular intervals, too organic to be purely mechanical, too measured to be random. The vox signal leads them into a transit chamber that might once have been a lift shaft or a cargo throat. Now it is filled with suspended debris and fragments of shattered decking rotating slowly in broken gravity. Attached to the far wall is an Imperial door, half buried under fused material, its Aquilae still visible beneath corrosion. A single lumen strip above it flickers like a dying pulse, illuminating the door just enough to make it feel intentional. As they approach, the door opens on its own. It does not grind or resist. It slides aside smoothly, as if recently maintained. The sound is wrong, not the pained protest of ancient mechanisms, but the quiet compliance of a system that has been waiting for this moment. The team hesitates only a heartbeat. Waiting is dangerous. They cross the threshold. Inside, the chamber resembles an infirmary, though distorted by time and collision. Medici stations are bolted to the deck, their instruments fused with alien components. Stained sheets hang in tatters from overhead rails, barely stirring in dead air. Along the walls, body bays are arranged in rows, each occupied by a figure in armor or voidsuit, strapped down with restraints that look too intact to be old. The first figure's helm is missing. The face beneath is pallid and still, mouth slightly open, eyes closed. If not for the faint rise and fall of the chest, the team would have dismissed it as another corpse preserved by cold and vacuum. The chest rises again, slowly, with a breath that fogs the air. The eyes open. They are not human eyes anymore. The irises have thinned into pale rings, pupils too wide, reflecting lumen light like an animal caught in glare. The figure's lips move soundlessly at first. Then the vox grill crackles with a whisper that is not carried by air but by interference. A prayer fragment, a half-remembered oath, words spoken as if continuing a litany interrupted moments ago. More eyes open down the row. One by one, restraints creak as bodies shift, armor plates scraping against metal beds. Some of these figures wear Imperial markings that should inspire relief. Aquilae on breastplates, regiment numbers, devotional icons. Others wear gear that is unmistakably alien in design, repurposed crudely into makeshift protection. All of them share the same altered stillness, the same unnatural calm. The team backs toward the door, weapons raised, but the chamber does not erupt into immediate violence. The figures do not lunge. They watch. Their heads turn in unison, tracking the team with synchronized precision that no wounded survivor should possess. The silence becomes unbearable, heavy with expectation. Then one of them speaks clearly. Not through vox distortion this time, but with a voice that carries inside the helmet, resonant and wrong. It calls out a rank and name from the team's roster, using the exact formal address used in Astra Militarum records. The named soldier stiffens, the sound cutting through discipline like a blade. No one here should know that name. No one here should have access to that data. And yet the voice repeats it, gentle, almost reassuring, as if offering comfort. The restraints snap open, not by the figure's hands, but by the medici stations themselves. Mechanisms click, releases disengage, and the bodies sit up with smooth, practiced motion. Their joints do not move like living joints. They move like articulated machines, precise and economical. The team fires then, instinct overriding doctrine. Bolter rounds tear into the first figure's chest, detonating ceramite and flesh in a burst of blood and bone. The figure does not fall. It jerks, momentarily destabilized, then steadies itself, stepping forward with mechanical patience. The wound does not bleed as it should. Instead, dark fluid beads, thick and slow, as if reluctant to leave the body. Behind it, other figures rise, their movements slightly asynchronous, as if each is receiving the same command with a fraction of delay. The team retreats through the door, slamming it shut, locking it with emergency seals. For a moment, there is only heavy breathing and the hiss of armor systems compensating for stress. Then the door begins to dent inward, not from violent impact, but from sustained pressure. Something is leaning against it, not pounding, pressing, patiently applying force with the certainty that eventually the material will yield. A voice filters through the bulkhead, distorted but intelligible. The same phrase the dead officer spoke, the same cadence, the same insistence on duty continuing beyond reason. The Hulk is not just animating bodies, it is preserving orders, using Imperial discipline like a weapon against the living. The door buckles, seals scream under strain. The team breaks into a run, boots hammering through the corridor, formation scattered by the urgency of flight. Vox channels fill with clipped commands and frantic confirmations. The clicking sound returns behind them, faster now, joined by the scrape of armor on metal, the steady, synchronized footfalls of things that should not still be moving. As they sprint, the corridor twists, bending away from any remembered route. Auspex maps redraw too late. Lumen strips flare and die. The Hulk tightens around them, not simply pursuing, but guiding, hurting them deeper with every forced turn. They realize then that the fight is not against a single enemy. It is against the Hulk's ability to turn everything they recognize, duty, survival instinct, even the sight of Imperial iconography, into bait. And somewhere ahead, in the dark beyond the next bend, the distress signal pulses again, strong and clear, promising answers it has no intention of delivering. The distress signal grows stronger as they descend, its rhythm steady now, confident. It no longer sounds like a plea. It sounds like a beacon that knows it will be answered. The corridor widens into a spine-like passage where the walls curve inward overhead, forming a vaulted arch of fused hull plating and alien alloy. Here, the Hulk feels less like a wreck and more like a vessel in motion, even though auspex insists it is drifting dead through real space. The pressure behind the eyes intensifies, not pain exactly, but the sensation of being observed from an angle that has nothing to do with sight. Thoughts feel slightly slower to form, as if something is listening for them. The tech priest mutters binharic fragments about data ghosts and warp residue, framing the sensation as residual interference from translation. No one challenges the explanation, because challenging it would require admitting a worse possibility. They pass a viewport fused shut with layers of crystallized residue. Through a narrow fracture in the surface, the warp can be seen. Not the screaming storm of active transit, but a stagnant, bruised distortion, like a scar left behind in reality. It pulses faintly, synchronized with the distress signal. The implication is unsettling. This Hulk did not merely pass through the warp. It brought something back with it, something that never fully let go. Among Imperial scholars, there are whispers, never formalized, never sanctioned, that space Hulks act as collectors, not by intent, but by consequence. Each translation through the Imperium strips fragments from the warp itself, echoes of emotion, half-formed entities, residues of belief and fear. Over centuries, these fragments accumulate, embedding themselves into the mass of the Hulk until the boundary between vessel and passenger erodes completely. Official doctrine dismisses this as superstition. The Hulk does not seem to agree. The corridor opens into a chamber so vast it defies initial comprehension. A cathedral of wreckage stretches in all directions, layers of decks stacked atop one another, suspended in fractured gravity. In the center hangs a knot of fused ships, their hulls interlocked around a core of pulsing distortion. Lumen beams struggle to penetrate it, bending subtly as they pass too close. The distress signal emanates from there, its source no longer ambiguous. This is not a bridge. It is not an engine room. It is a heart. The closer they move, the more the environment reacts. Vox channels fill with whispered fragments in High Gothic, binharic, and languages that do not exist in any Imperial archive. None are loud enough to isolate, but all carry intent. Auspex readings spike and crash, unable to resolve the density of matter and energy coiled together at the center. The Hulk is not empty space wrapped around threats. It is a structure built around a presence. Here, rumors gain weight. Navigators speak, in rare moments of candor, of space hulks that feel different in the warp. Heavier, harder to push aside, as if they possess momentum beyond physics. Some claim these hulks draw warp currents toward themselves, riding them like tides rather than being carried helplessly. Others insist they hear choirs where there should be silence, harmonies formed from the residual screams of crews long dead. These accounts are dismissed officially as stress hallucinations. Unofficially, routes are adjusted to avoid known hulks whenever possible. The Hulk responds to proximity now with unmistakable intent. Pathways form where none existed before, guiding the team toward the core. Structural supports retract and extend smoothly, clearing obstacles rather than creating them. The realization dawns slowly and horribly. The Hulk wants them to reach this place. Boarding teams are not intruders to be repelled. They are resources, drawn inward to feed something that grows more complex with every consumption. The Imperial dead they encountered earlier begin to make sense in this context. Not merely animated corpses, but anchors, points of stability where human cognition, duty, and identity were preserved just enough to be reused. The Hulk does not understand humanity, but it understands function. Orders, ranks, signals, distress calls. It uses the language of the Imperium because that language reliably produces movement. As they edge closer to the core, one of the team stumbles, gauntlet brushing against the fused hull. The contact sends a jolt through their armor systems, data flooding sensors faster than it can be parsed. For a heartbeat, they see something that is not a vision so much as an impression. Endless corridors folding in on themselves, voices repeating the same phrases across centuries, a slow accretion of identity built from the remnants of countless minds. The tech priest recoils, severing the contact, mechadendrites twitching erratically. They whisper a single word over the vox, stripped of binharic precision. The Hulk is not possessed in the way catechisms describe. It is not a singular demon or a defined xenos intelligence. It is a convergence, a mass of leftover intent, belief, fear, and duty compressed into something that mimics purpose because purpose is the most common human residue left behind in the warp. The distress signal pulses again, louder now, resonant enough to be felt through bone. It is no longer asking for rescue. It is announcing arrival. The team reaches the outer edge of the core and feels the atmosphere change as if they have stepped across an invisible threshold. The air grows thick, heavy with ozone and a faint sweetness that does not belong in sealed void corridors. Armor auspex registers contaminants that do not match any known chemical profile, then promptly retracts the reading as if ashamed of its uncertainty. Lumen beams jitter as they sweep, their cones bending slightly near the pulsing distortion, refusing to hold a straight line. Even the sound of their own breathing seems delayed, arriving a fraction of a second after each inhale, as if the chamber is replaying them imperfectly. They find the source of the distress code at the base of the knot, an Imperial vox array embedded deep within the fused hull, cables threading into alien matter like veins. It is broadcasting on its own, but it is not operating alone. Nearby, other transmitters have been grafted into the structure. Xenos emitters, ancient astropathic relays, even the skeletal remains of a ship's choir cage, its wrought iron twisted into shapes that look almost like prayer. The outputs overlap, harmonize, then separate, cycling through signals until one pattern emerges as dominant. The Hulk has built itself a voice. The signal shifts abruptly, not in frequency, but in meaning. It stops repeating the old distress code and instead begins transmitting a new sequence. Imperial command encryption. Updated, current, correct. The team's vox systems accept it automatically, as if it were a legitimate transmission from higher authority. For a heartbeat, the temptation is overwhelming. If the Hulk can speak in the Imperium's language this fluently, it can also lure in anything that listens. Entire fleets, salvage armadas, crusade groups seeking glory. The thought lands with a nauseating clarity, and then the whispers become coherent. Not words at first, but layered impressions. The sense of standing in a corridor that you have never seen and yet remember intimately. The feeling of kneeling before an altar you have never visited. reciting a vow you did not choose. The memory of dying, over and over, in different bodies, with the same order echoing at the end. Maintain position. Hold. Advance. These are not commands spoken by any officer present. They are carried in the structure itself, stored like residue, replayed in loops until they become instinct. One of the team's members begins to recite a litany without realizing. The voice is steady, calm, almost relieved, as if the act of speaking the words solves a problem they had been holding in their chest for hours. Another's weapon lowers half an inch, not out of choice, but because their arms suddenly feel heavy. The Hulk is not attacking their bodies. It is reaching for the part of them that obeys. The tech priest fights it differently, whispering Binharic strings like a drowning person reciting coordinates. They attempt to anchor their mind in logic, in data, in the certainty that machine spirits do not lie. But the data here is warped, and the machine spirits are confused. The tech priest's mechadendrites tremble, not from fear, but from conflicting inputs. The Hulk is a contradiction wrapped in metal, and contradictions are poison to systems built on order. A shape shifts within the pulsing distortion, not emerging fully, not stepping out like a creature, but pressing close enough to the boundary that its outline becomes visible. It resembles nothing stable. An echo of a ship's prow, then a human face, then a knot of cables twisting into something like fingers. Each form lasts only an instant before dissolving into another. The effect is less like seeing an enemy, and more like watching a mind dream. This is where the rumors the Imperium buries become unavoidable. Some Ordo Xenos savants have whispered that space hulks are not just debris fields, but mechanisms, accidental vessels that carry warp echoes into real space, slowly condensing them until they gain weight and intention. Others, more cautious, insist the Hulk is simply a mirror, reflecting the minds of those who enter until their thoughts become indistinguishable from the structure around them. And in the most forbidden corners of speculation, there are those who claim Hulks become hungry, because hunger is the most persistent emotion left behind by anyone who boards them. Hunger for survival, for rescue, for meaning, for the last familiar voice on a vox grill. Here, at the core, all of those theories feel equally plausible and equally useless. The distortion pulses again, stronger, and the chamber responds. Bulkheads slide shut around them, sealing exit paths with smooth, practiced motion. The Hulk does not trap them violently. It closes doors the way a mouth closes around food. Calmly. Completely. The team's Vox channels light up with incoming transmissions, dozens at once, all bearing Imperial identifiers, all requesting confirmation, all offering extraction coordinates that feel almost believable. The Hulk is rehearsing for larger prey. The team realizes then that the mission was never about salvage or containment. Their presence was a test, a calibration. The Hulk needed living minds to refine its mimicry, to update its signals, to learn current encryption and current fears. It needed to hear the rhythm of modern human speech, to taste the shape of modern Imperial obedience. And now it has. Somewhere within the pulsing knot, the shape shifts again, briefly forming the outline of an Imperial officer. Face half seen, features blurred, mouth opening as if to speak. When the voice comes, it is perfectly calm, perfectly authoritative, and utterly empty behind the authority. The word hits like a command brand, sinking into muscle memory. For a heartbeat, the team almost obeys, almost steps forward into the distortion, into whatever waits beyond the boundary of real space. Discipline and terror collide, and for an instant, neither wins. Then one of them fires, bolter roar shattering the chamber's oppressive hush. Rounds slam into the fused Vox arrays, detonating cables and tearing chunks of grafted metal free. Sparks bloom. The distress signal stutters, warps, then fractures into static. The Hulk responds, not with anger but with adjustment. The chamber trembles. Gravity shifts violently, throwing bodies sideways. The pulsing distortion flares, and the whispers surge into a roar that fills every channel, every thought, every breath. The team is forced back, dragged by maglocks and momentum toward a corridor that opens where no corridor existed a moment before. The Hulk is not letting them leave. It is moving them to the next stage. The corridor the Hulk opens for them is not an escape route. It feels like an answer to a question they never asked. A path shaped by something that has already decided what the end should look like. The walls here are cleaner, less chaotic. The fused plating arranged with almost ceremonial symmetry. Lumen strips burn steadily, too steady, their light falling across devotional markings that have been scraped into the metal with patient repetition. Someone has been here before. Someone tried to make this place make sense. The team stumbles forward in fractured gravity, armor scraping, breath loud in vox grills that cannot fully drown the sound of the whispers still chasing their thoughts. Behind them, the core's roar fades to a low, distant pulse, as if satisfied. The Hulk is guiding them away from the heart not because it has given up, but because it has learned what it needed to learn. Now it wants to see what they do with the knowledge, how far panic and discipline can be pushed before obedience snaps. They find the proof in the next chamber. It is an archive space, or what remains of one. Rows of cogitator stacks fused into the floor, data spindles stacked like bones, sealed cabinets burst open and pressed into the walls by impacts that should have shattered them. At first, it looks like the kind of ruin salvage crews dream of. Then the team sees the markings on the cabinets, the sigils that are too precise to be decorative. Wax remnants, purity seals. The imprint of the Inquisition's rosette etched into a metal plate that has been half swallowed by alien growth. The air shifts as if the chamber is holding its breath. This is where the Imperium's relationship with space hulks reveals itself. Not in sermons or propaganda, but in omission. Someone once came here to retrieve something. Someone once decided that what was found was too dangerous to be left behind, and too dangerous to bring back unfiltered. The evidence is not in intact documents. Most of them are ruined, their data corrupted beyond recovery. The evidence is in the attempt at control. Seal marks layered over seal marks. Redaction plates welded onto storage units. Sections of the chamber scorched clean with controlled promethium burns, as if erasing the idea of information was considered safer than keeping it. The team's vox channels flicker as they step deeper, and for a moment a transmission cuts through with unnatural clarity. Not the Hulk's mimicry this time. Something older. A recorded voice, calm and precise, reading a formal directive in High Gothic. The wording is incomplete, broken by static, but the intent is unmistakable. Containment, quarantine, denial. A designation flashes briefly on a cogitator screen, an ordo stamp, then a code that dissolves into unreadable glyphs. The tech priest stares at it a fraction too long. Their mechadendrites twitch, running recognition routines that return too many matches at once, like a mind stumbling over a memory it was never meant to possess. The Hulk notices. The lumen strips dim half a degree. The pressure behind the eyes returns, heavier now, as if the environment itself is leaning closer. This is why no one is meant to return. Not because survival is impossible, though it often is, but because survival creates witnesses. Witnesses bring back fragments, updated encryption patterns, grafted vox arrays, the idea of a heart pulsing with warp residue, Imperial dead obeying orders after death. None of that fits comfortably inside the Imperium's necessary fiction that the galaxy is knowable, containable, catalogued. If a space hulk can learn and adapt, if it can speak with Imperial authority, then every fleet response becomes a liability. Every salvage operation becomes a potential infection vector, not of disease, but of doubt. Somewhere in the Imperium's higher strata, this truth has already been accepted, not as public doctrine, but as operational instinct. That is why a space hulk can be monitored for months before any decisive action is taken. That is why calls for immediate annihilation are sometimes delayed by layers of bureaucracy that feel less like incompetence and more like hesitation. Destroying a hulk is expensive. Boarding it is worse. And yet, letting it drift away is sometimes the choice that gets made. Not because it is safe, but because it is quiet. There are rumors, the kind traded in low voices between voidsmen who have lived too long and seen too much. That some hulks are allowed to pass because certain truths are better left inside them, locked in the dark where only the dead can keep them. That when a boarding team returns with coherent testimony, the debrief is not a celebration, but an inquest, and the survivors are kept under watch until their minds can be assessed for contamination that has no clear diagnostic markers. That reports vanish into sealed archives and names are reassigned. The same way certain tragedies are rewritten into victories, so the wider Imperium can keep believing. The team feels that machinery of denial closing in even without receiving a single transmission from outside. It is in the architecture of this chamber, in the layers of attempted erasure, in the fact that the rosette mark exists here at all. The Inquisition did not come to learn. It came to decide what must never be widely known. A new sound creeps into the corridor behind them. Steady footfalls, synchronized, patient. Not the scrambling rush of a swarm, not the heavy stomp of a brute, but the measured cadence of something trained. Something that understands formation. The things that should be dead have not stopped following. They have simply found the right pace. The team withdraws from the archive chamber, and as they do, one of the cogitator stacks flickers to life, displaying a single line of text in clean, modern script. As if the Hulk is offering a final courtesy, a conclusion meant to feel official. Then the line changes. The words on the cogitator screen sit in the mind like a contaminant. Acceptable, not victory, not survival. Acceptable, the way an administratum clerk marks a shipment that arrived with losses already accounted for. The Hulk has learned the Imperium's coldest language, the vocabulary of sacrifice made routine, and it wears those words like armor. The team moves faster now, not because they believe speed will save them, but because staying still in the presence of that kind of understanding feels like consenting to it. The corridor ahead narrows again, guiding them away from the archive chamber and toward a series of pressure doors arranged in sequence. Each bears purity seals in varying states of decay, some so old the wax has cracked into powder, others newer, still faintly sticky as if applied within the last few decades. That detail is worse than any corpse. It means the Hulk has been boarded recently. It means the cycle is not ancient history. It is current, ongoing, repeating. As they reach the first door, it opens for them with the same smooth compliance as before. The second does the same. The third hesitates, just long enough to raise fear, then slides aside. The Hulk is not blocking them. It is pacing them, herding them into a controlled route as surely as it guided them to the core. Behind them the footfalls continue, steady and unhurried. The pursuers do not need to sprint. They know where the path ends. The corridor terminates in a docking bay, or what might once have been a docking bay, before collision and fusion made it into something else. The ceiling is lost in shadow. The far wall is a jagged wound where hull plating has torn open, revealing a void pocket beyond. Suspended within that pocket is the outline of an assault craft, imperial in design, battered but intact enough to be recognizable. Its hull markings are faded. Its registration code is from an old pattern, one no longer used, and yet its lumen lights glow faintly, steady, welcoming, the way a rescue craft should look when it arrives at the edge of despair. The team hesitates. Discipline demands caution. Hope demands movement. The craft's boarding ramp is down. A vox transmission crackles, clean as a liturgical bell. A voice speaks in crisp, practiced tones, using proper protocol, proper clearance identifiers, the exact cadence taught in Imperial void etiquette. It announces an extraction window. It confirms a safe corridor. It requests immediate boarding. Every instinct screams that it is a lie. And yet the voice is perfect. Too perfect. That is the problem. The Imperium's real communications are messy. Delays, bureaucratic clutter, static, overlapping priorities. This transmission is pristine, designed not to convince the mind, but to trigger obedience. The Hulk is not improvising anymore. It is executing a refined script. The first of the pursuers appears at the bay's far entrance. It moves into the lumen light with calm certainty, armor catching the glow in familiar angles. For a heartbeat, it looks like an Imperial warrior. Then the details resolve. The Aquilae on its chest is warped, stretched, half consumed by alien veining. The helm is cracked, and beneath the crack something pale glints where a human eye should be. Behind it more shapes emerge, their movements synchronized, their posture disciplined. They do not rush. They advance like a unit responding to an order. The team fires, bolter rounds thundering through the bay. Explosions bloom across ceramite and fused flesh. Bodies jerk, stagger, then continue forward. Some fall, their limbs twitching, and the Hulk's growth threads through them, anchoring them in place as if preserving them for later use. The bay begins to fill with smoke and dust, and through it, the assault craft's lights continue to glow, unwavering. The lure does not change. It does not need to. They sprint for the craft. Boots slam against deck plating. Breath becomes ragged, loud, desperate. The closer they get, the more wrong the air feels. Thicker, warmer, carrying that faint sweetness again. Like something organic trying to mask itself as clean, recycled atmosphere. The ramp's surface is slick, not with oil, but with condensation that forms too quickly. The craft's interior is lit, open, inviting. And then the team sees the detail that seals the truth. Inside the craft, strapped into the seats, are bodies. Not slumped like corpses. Seated upright, harnessed, helms forward. Their armor markings match old units, forgotten crusades, erased rosters. Their vox grills are dark, but their hands rest on weapons with practiced familiarity, as if ready to rise at a command. They are not passengers. They are cargo. The craft is not rescue. It is a delivery mechanism, a way to move the Hulk's repurposed dead into new spaces, to spread its accumulated orders and mimicry beyond the confines of this drifting labyrinth. The distress signal, the perfect protocols, the extraction window, all of it is bait designed to make the living carry the infection outward. Behind them, the disciplined footfalls draw closer. In that moment, the team faces the Imperium's oldest, ugliest moral dilemma. Survival versus contamination. Escape versus risk. If they board the craft, they might live long enough to reach a vessel waiting outside, to bring back testimony, to warn someone, to be heard. But they may also bring back the Hulk's voice, its learned codes, its repurposed dead, and the subtle pressure that turns obedience into a weapon. If they do not board, they die here. Quietly, acceptably. One of them, shaking, raises a melta charge. Not toward the pursuing dead, but toward the assault craft itself. Their hands tremble around the trigger, because destruction feels like blasphemy when the thing in front of you wears the shape of salvation. The tech priest whispers a denial cant, voice cracking, not sure if they are praying for courage or forgiveness. The charge detonates with a bloom of white heat that turns the bay into a furnace. The assault craft's hull warps, then collapses inward, its false promise reduced to molten ruin. The bodies inside do not scream. They simply burn, their restraints holding them upright as the fire eats through armor and flesh alike. For a heartbeat, the Hulk's core pulse intensifies, as if reacting to the loss. Then the bay lights flicker. The vox channels fill with static, and within the static, a single phrase repeats, calm, patient, almost amused. The team turns, knowing now that there will be no extraction, no clean return, only the choice of how they end, and what they refuse to carry back into the Imperium with their dying breath. And somewhere in the dark beyond the bay's shattered wall, the void waits, silent, vast, indifferent, while the Space Hulk drifts on, already crafting its next signal, its next voice, its next perfect lie.